So let's move on to this piece by Wedge, which about the public sphere in China. Um, uh, we talk about what is public sphere in the first place, um, and then mm, I think um, called Jürgen Habermas, and he says there is something called public sphere, which um, simply means a society that's not democratic. Which simply means a society that's democracy needs to have a civil society uh, that is free from both state and the market. And again, the US, it's one of the reason why uh, they kind of suggest that we don't have a particularly well functioning public sphere. Uh, Certainly, we don't have the state influencing too much of what we can do. uh, you are pretty free to say what you want to, but the market might impinge on what we can do, and your ability to be important and to push for a change really depends on how wealthy you are. If the criticism of the United States would be that economically powerful are too powerful politically, then you kind of saying that the market plays too greater a role in empowering people politically. Wedge says to create a true public sphere where everybody's opinion are valued equally and one vote has equal value needs to make sure that civil society, meaning people acting outside the government, are free both from the government and from simply being valued based on their worth, on their economic worth. Um, Now, the part of the public sphere which is very important for us to focus on, he says, I mean, Wedge says, in order for this to function properly, you need to make sure that the media and publishing enterprises mm, enjoy a great deal of freedom, right? That they are not interfered with by the state. But frankly, one of the things Habermas also points out is when these things are driven too much by economic concerns, that's not good either. And one of the key examples here would be the awful news that um, we have in the United States, because it's all about wanting to sell the news. So rather than trying to explain things to people, you want as many people as possible to be watching CNN.com or Fox News, and they end up just giving you stories that are titillating and little bit controversial rather than really caring whether you understand things very much. And again, the bottom line is they wanted to sell their products, right? And nobody wants to just hear something boring that's actually going to help you or help them. Instead, they want to just get angry about things that they can't change. But moving back to China and whether they have got a public sphere, especially when it comes to their media and publishing enterprises, Wedge points out that it is still very controlled, and there is a ministry of at the state level, the administration of press. So we don't have something that controls the press in the United States, and we have got our First Amendments that expressingly prohibits the kind of state control. But in China, that's not the case. There is a ministry that controls the press, and it says, no media enterprises can be owned by a majority private owners. That means any kind of media enterprise it exists, newspaper or book publishers, the state has to be the largest owner of that and control the decisions that are being made. Likewise, with the entry of social media, it's been heavily regulated in China, very heavily regulated. Now, one can say that it might be good if we could just block all the fake news and that was out there, and but here we have got a strong draconian control of these things. Things like Google have sometimes been outlawed and are limited use, and there can be punished for things such as picking quarrels and um, provoking trouble, whatever that means, or spreading defamatory rumors. So it's rather confusing, but the state can step in rather easily when you are very active on Facebook or another social media. Um, however, obey with all this being true, um, they could say that, or the author Wedge suggests that there are three signs, of a developing public sphere. There are three ways in which, even despite all the state control of media by the Chinese government, we actually are seeing a move towards democracy. So, you know, so the first reason for this, they say, is economic incentives. Now, there is a thing called ISBN numbers for something to be published. It has to have an ISBN number. And in China, state organization and not private publishers, but the state organization have the monopoly over the ISBN's uh, numbers. But they don't have a good grasp or the sense over what the readers really want to read. So they have started to form that out of out to people who can market better. And marketing here not just means selling, but also find out what people want, and so that they actually sell the rights to distribute ISBN numbers to private bidders. And the private bidders might be selling the ISBN numbers to somebody who is writing a book that could be critical of the Chinese government or friendly towards the West. So, by privatizing this economically, they are opening themselves up to more of an unknown, uh, right? They are opening up to more of an unknown and less control over what kind of book gets published, with this idea of also controlling the internet. It's difficult to control the internet, no doubt, right? Especially the Chinese government tend to allow new forms of social media to exist because they like to first access whether it's also able to use this new media. Um, if a lot of people are going on a Facebook and Chinese government is able to get in there on the Facebook and issue a lot of propaganda and fake news and the like, then maybe it likes Facebook, and it will allow the technology to continue. Only when it sees these things being used to a greater degree for forces that are not friendly to the government will they end up banning them or shutting them down. But this always allows for a certain period of time at the beginning for a lot of freedom when a new social media platform develops. The final things has to do with the nature of multiple China, and the fact that many Chinese have been moving out of the country. Again, one of the four largest immigrant groups in the United States are Chinese. And now Mexico might be number one, but I think China is number two ahead of India. So it means that there is a huge community of Chinese throughout the world, and there are lots of other places where you can publish Chinese books outside China, right? So there is this virtual public sphere, a virtual, free, non controlled publishing community that exists in Hong Kong and certainly in Taiwan, but also even in the United States and in certain Western countries that have large communities of expatriates of Chinese who have moved away. And this results not just in things being read in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and US, but many of these books or pamphlets or the like are pirated and then brought back into China, mm, imported back into China, where they can't be legally produced, but they become an imported as a kind of goods coming in. Whether this is enough to hasten the development of democracy is really an open question. But I think we have seen the way in which China is more controlling than the case of Soviet Union in terms of the pace at which it allows for economic, but especially for political reforms to happen. It is very um, um, cautious about giving up controls uh, of this process to gravity. It wants to have control. So we will see that brings to where that brings China in the future days. But as it is now, it has considerable loosening of control in economic sphere, but it still has a tight grip over the political and the public sphere.